Hello everybody, this is Enrique. I am doing a introduction to Jupyter Notebooks on Google Colaboratory today. So this hopefully will be a pretty quick introduction to Jupyter Notebooks for my high school students and really for anybody. But this is part of a Department of Defense collaboration that I'm working on. All right, well, let's just get started. What is Jupyter Notebooks and Google Colab? Well, let's just go ahead and open it. So the way I'm going to open it is by going on to google.com. So you have to have a Gmail in order to access Google Colaboratory. So the first step, if you don't have a Google account, is to create a Google account. But once you have your Google account, you can go into your Google Drive or whatever. So if you go to your Google, you can actually Google Colaboratory as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and Google it. So welcome to Colaboratory. If you click on this, this is an easy way to get in. So this will have all these are files that I've already made or worked on. I'm not sure if this is how it looks the first time when you open it, but you can do a new notebook and boom, you are in Jupyter Notebook. Another way to get here, this is actually, I don't usually Google Colab. I usually am on my Google Drive. And it's the same way you would make a Google Doc or a Google Slides. So when you are in your Drive, you can create a Google Doc by clicking Google Doc, and then I want to create a new Google Doc, right? Same kind of thing, but except for instead of clicking on Google Doc, you can click under More, and there's an icon down here that says Google Colaboratory. So if I click there, it creates a Jupyter Notebook, okay? Now, I've noticed that in the last month or so, Google has made it. It used to just be, it was on your drive no matter what. So if I go to new file and then click more, there was always a Google Colab. But there's a lot of my students are not seeing this. So if you don't see this, that's okay. You just have to add it on. So if this isn't here, you go to connect more apps, and Google has all these applications you can upload to your Google account, and so you would then search for Google Colaboratory, so Colaboratory like that, and mine's installed because I was able to, it's on there. But if you have not installed, I think the default setting right now is to not have it installed. So the first step you got to do is install it by hitting this plus thing or whatever, and it's real easy. You just click on it and it installs. Once it's installed, you can go into new, more, Google Colab. Okay, great. So let's just play with this one that I just made. I'll close this other one. So this is a Jupyter Notebook. Cool. By the way, just like a Google Doc, you can actually share this file with and collaborate with other people. So a Google Doc, the reason we use Google Docs instead of Microsoft Word, for example, is usually you want to share your files with other people. If you're working in a group and, and this year everyone's on Zoom, right? If you want to share a file over Zoom breakout room or something, you can definitely do that. So the way I do this is just by exact same way I share a Google Doc. You can click on the share button up here in the top right-hand corner. And this is actually sharing the Jupyter Notebook. So I can add people. I can share this with my coworker Allison, and I can give her different permissions, right? She can just be a viewer and not an editor. Or if I'm working with someone, maybe they can comment. They can edit the document directly, and it saves the changes. Or maybe just commentator, right? And then you can type in a message. You can also, I'm going to cancel this for a second. You can also get a link and email people, or change to anyone with link. So anyone with this link can view my Jupyter Notebook. So I use this a lot. I share a link because I'm a teacher, and like if I'm sharing a Jupyter Notebook file with my students and I want them to do the assignment, I'm not going to have them edit the document, the master document, but they can view it. And just like a Google Doc that's viewable, they can make a copy of it, edit it, turn it in as their own work, right? Okay, so just like a Google Doc, you can name this anything you want. My first Jupyter Notebook. Okay, and so now let's talk a little bit more about what is Jupyter Notebooks, not like what I can do with it, and really it's very similar to Google Docs. So there's two kinds of blocks I'm going to call them blocks. Code blocks and their cells, okay? Code cells and text cells. So there's two kinds of cells that you can use. Let's start with text cell because that's the easiest one. So usually when you're doing your homework in elementary school, oh, by the way, I want to move this to the top. This one, so right now there's a code block at the top. So if I hit the up arrow, it moves it up to the top. Okay, so now I have a double click to enter. Okay, so I have a text block. So if I type in my name, that's how I turn in my work, right? I type in my name, perhaps the date, right? Where I go to school. So if you're looking over here, this is what it would look like. And as you can see, it's not actually saving like the enters or the returns, right? And so if you want to enter these returns, you have to do these weird slash things. And then you can see on this side what it's going to look like. So on the right hand side over here, you see what you're typing. And on the left hand side is your code or markup area in your text cell. So I'll put DOD STEM Ambassador because that's what I am. And I represent First Robotics. So it's a true story. Department of Defense. Oh, and I should put some of those guys. Okay, really quick. Let's say I want to make First Robotics bold, right? So I can just type in, I can select it and hit the bold button. Oh, notice what the code did. The code, it put in these like little asterisk, little multiplication things or whatever you call these things. So if I wanted to make STEM bold, I can click on the bold button, or I can actually just type in these things and it just knows how to do that. So if I click off, by the way, if you click off the thing, like click into this code cell, you can see that's all it is. And I double click to re-enter. So I can italicize if I want West High. So right now it's just italicizing West, but if I want to do West High, all italicized, I can do like just a single multiplication thing around the high 5. So, okay, that looks great. Okay, so this is all great and all, but this is kind of non-intuitive. I mean, why wouldn't I use Google Docs or Microsoft Word for this? Because it's kind of weird. Hey, you can also like, I have to put a space in there. It doesn't know what I'm talking about. That's kind of interesting. You can also like put in pictures and things like this. So if I want to do a hyperlink, so let's say I want to, let me go put in my school district hyperlink. So I'm going to copy my so if I want to put in a hyperlink here, I can do one of these. So I'll just put, oh, I guess I copied and pasted too much there. Let me go back here and delete that. That'll be good. Oh, and then the link text. So this you have to actually change to what it is. Salt Lake School District. Sorry this is taking so slow, and maybe you're not interested in this, but you can always fast forward. Put in a picture. So pictures are going to be kind of weird, because I'll show you what I mean. So let's go ahead and put in an image here. On my desktop, I have a picture of my baby, a hunk JPEG. So we'll put that in. And you can see that all of this stuff right here, it looks like I just destroyed the file, right? Like, and look at all that. I'm scrolling up. I'm just doing nothing but scrolling up. But I'm just gonna use the bar now and go all the way to the top. But you can see what's the preview is. It's a picture of a hunk, right? So let me click on this like code box. So it goes away, and there's a hunk, right? And I noticed I forgot to put in my little slashes for the Salt Lake School District. If you hit enter twice, actually, oh, that's doing it like 4 times. There's a little lag. That'll make it so it'll do a break. So okay. Let's go to the bottom here and click on this. So you know it's not the best text editor kind of software around. You know, that's what Microsoft Word is really good at doing. But it is nice to know that you can add text and images and that kind of stuff fairly easily in this Jupyter Notebook. Okay, and it's not terrible, but it's, you know, there's a little bit of skill involved. Great, but what is this Jupyter Notebook? I mean, I'd rather use Microsoft Word than one of these guys. Well, in addition to doing text, you can also do code. So, and that's really the power of this Jupyter Notebook. Let's add a text block up here and let's start writing some code in here. So let's do some simple calculations. I'm just going to annotate this because that's what you do with text boxes. So here's some simple calculations. So we can do things like addition, subtraction, so like 2 plus 3. How do I get the notebook to process this? So like if I hit the enter button, nothing happens. So that's sort of lame, but this is like a little play button right here. So you have to run the code cell, or execute it. So this is what you have to do every single time. And I think this is non-intuitive to a lot of students as well. Like they type in their code and they hit the enter button and nothing happens, or they think that it happens, something is actually happening. They write more code. Like they'll say, okay, well, what's 4 times 4? And then they'll hit enter and nothing happens, right? So what you have to do is execute the cell with the play button. So it's thinking. It's a little bit of lag here. So 5 is the answer. 4 times 4 would be like 16. Let's add some other code. We could do order of operations. So that means putting in parentheses and that kind of thing. So like, what's 5 plus 6 divided by 7 plus 3? You know, something like that. See, that's cool. It gave us this really long number, right? So that's it's a repeating decimal. I can see it, isn't it? That's just playing tricks on me. Anyway, sorry, I'm just patterns. Okay, so we can do kind of very simple calculations, and that's great. And this is actually doing like the order of operations properly, by the way. If you want to double check that, you can. Great. Well, good. So I mean, honestly, it's like I know this sounds weird, but if your math teacher ever assigns you math homework, you can see how this could be a way for you to put in your math calculations and annotate them one step at a time, which is great, but Jupyter is way more powerful than that and used for other things. So let's talk about variables. Okay, let me add a text blocks here. So I'm going to introduce variables here. So what is a variable? So like, let me add a code block here. So let's just start with some very simple things. So maybe this up here could be like you know, how much money you make per hour or something. That's your wage, right? So let's just call wage 457, right? So if I hit the execute button now, let's add another code block. Then Jupyter now, the notebook now has memorized this variable. It has it in this background, right? That's kind of the way I think about it. It's kind of in the back. And you can call it anytime you want. So like, if I work 40 hours a week times my wage, look, there it is, shortcut. Then I'm going to make $182.80 per week, right? That's cool. So why would I do it this way instead of just typing? So because I could have just typed in 40 times 4.457, right? And it gives me the same answer. Well, then maybe my wage, maybe I get like $1 an hour raise, right? And so I can just modify my variable and then rerun the code, right? This is actually kind of interesting because you need to do this one first before you do this one, right? So let's say I'm no longer, I'm going to come up here and just do weeks. Let's say, or maybe like, yeah, just to get called weekly hours or something. Weekly hours. Maybe my weekly hours changed to 35, right? Like for whatever reason. If I type in weekly hours equals 35, I come down here and change this to weekly hours times wage, and then I press execute, I get an error message. And the reason for that is because I haven't defined weekly hours yet. I just typed it in. I didn't execute this. So the order matters. You have to define your variables first. Otherwise, it doesn't have it in the background, let's say, to pull it up whenever it wants. It knows what wage is because you've already clicked on that, but it doesn't know what weekly hours is. In fact, if I went in, here's a way to double check that the variable has been saved. You can actually type in wage by itself and hit the execute button. It'll tell you what the wage is, right? So we haven't defined weekly hours yet. So when we type in weekly hours, see, there's no like shortcut coming up. It says, I don't know. There's some sort of error, right? And I guess this, because we're going to talk about this at some point. I'm going to talk about it now. This is where a lot of people get scared, especially students. It's easy to fear failure. You know, like, and I was sort of talking about this with my student. I noticed this in my first lesson that I ever did this. It was like, oh my gosh, these guys are just failing constantly. And it goes back to this idea of growth mindset. You can't be afraid of failure because, you know, coding, you're failing all the time. Like no programmer gets it right the first time. Nobody. You really have to just embrace the fact that you're going to fail a million times, and eventually at the end your code will work. And you shouldn't be frustrated. This should be an opportunity. In fact, the debuggers are nice because they tell you how to fix it. And I'll tell you how to read these things right now. See all this stuff in the front? I never read any of that. I never read any of that. That's all really scary. The only thing I read is the last line of the error message. So here's the last line of the error message. And that's the only thing I read in Jupyter. I mean, so like, let's say it's name error, name weekly hours is not defined. So what that's saying is you haven't yet made that variable. And by the way, that's the same error message down here because we haven't defined it yet. So if I play this now, if I go up here and play it, because I hit that play button, the execute button, I've now defined weekly hours. So if I hit this one again, 35. And now I can do this one, and that's how much money I make in a week if I'm working at $5.57 an hour for 35 hours, right? So here's another helpful tip, okay? Run all the code blocks from top to bottom, because they're sequential, and usually the programmers have it so that if you just hit play on every single one, top to bottom, the code will work, okay? There's actually a shortcut for this up here at the top, runtime, run all. And you can do restart and run all, so we can do that. It'll ask you, you sure you want to do this? All your local variables are going to be lost, because when you restart something, it deletes all of those. Let's say yes. And right now it's running them all. So there we go. You can kind of see it. It went real fast. Okay. Anyway, so that's all fine and good. And variables. Why do I care about these variables, right? Like, How does that really get me anything? Why would I ever use Jupyter Notebooks? These variables, by the way, are also case sensitive. I guess before I leave these, so if I type in like a capital wage here, capital W, it's not smart enough to know what that you know, see how down here let's read the last line here. Name error, name wage is not defined. But you're like, dude, I've just used wage up here. Look, I'll hit play again just in case, and then I'll hit down here, and it still says wage. And the reason is like you have to use all lowercase. And I see a lot of students struggling with this because you're so used to typing things into Microsoft Word or Google Docs. You are so used to it. See how it doesn't autocorrect right there? I actually tried to do a typo. Used to it. So when you're doing programming, typically, I don't know any editor that like autocorrects, but that's just because your code, it knows you have to make everything like perfectly line up. And so everything has to be lowercase or uppercase, right? You're so used to autocorrect. Well, that's perfect, man. Look at that. I'm gonna have to laugh. Okay, so again, if you make sure everything's case sensitive, and you're gonna be okay. And this requires you to double check when you type something in, you should definitely be looking at what you're doing and have sort of a healthy paranoia about it. But even if that's what the debugger is there for, man, it's there to like help you out with the case sensitive stuff. So just understand you're gonna have to think when it says some error message. I know that's kind of scary. You think like I typed it in perfectly, but if you get an error message, don't freak out. Take a breath, read it, and then try to decipher what it's saying. One of the most common ones is that the variable is not defined because you probably misspelled it, or you forgot to hit execute. And that's okay. That just comes with experience. You just understand that that's like the most common thing. Okay, how else can we make comments? So programmers are used to they're used to making comments in the code instead of like using these Jupyter text cells. So how that works is they just use this hashtag symbol. Hashtag this calculates your earnings for the week. So if I hit the execute button, it calculates this. It ignores all the stuff that's green. See this stuff in front of the hashtag? It'll ignore that. So if I hit like enter here, this hashtag line is in green, but this one's in black. There's no hashtag in front of this. So when I hit the play button, it gives me an error message like invalid syntax. I have no idea what you're trying to. It thinks you're trying to do something using functions or some sort of something, but it doesn't understand. There's some invalid syntax. That means something went wrong here with your code, like very wrong, right? So how can I fix it? I can just put a hashtag on that line and hit play, and it'll calculate my weekly hours times my wage, right? So you'll typically see a lot of programmers use this because programmers and other languages, so we're programming in Python, by the way. So Jupyter is not misspelled here. Like the first time I opened Jupyter Notebooks up, I'm like, they didn't know how I spell Jupyter, man. That's not how you spell Jupyter. But Jupyter, the PY stands for Python, and we're going to be programming in Python here. This is what we're doing right now. And I know this sounds weird, but like we are sort of segueing into that. We now have a notebook that's like a fancy calculator that you can write comments in, and maybe you can save some variables. That's great. But like, why would I ever use this? I don't understand. And the reason is you can write more advanced code, and you're going to do this in Python. Okay, so one thing that would be nice is if I like when I opened up a Jupyter notebook to do some sort of math or science activity or something, that it remembers some variables that I use all the time. Like if I just had like a library of variables it could just save all the time, that would be really nice. because I don't want to just keep defining variables. It just makes my work inefficient. So that the first thing you actually do in like 90% of your notebooks is you import your libraries. Well, so I will like put my name down first, but then the very first code block that I usually do is importing some math libraries that have like some like things in them that like it just like you use. So where do I find these? So I actually don't even remember the code because I just copy and paste it off my other notebook files. So this is good opportunity to like find some Google Colab. I'm gonna go to Google Colaboratory and click on here, and I'll just open up a random. So my first Jupyter Notebook, yeah, can I search? Oh, I can scroll down. I'm like, can I search? So pendulum plot's usually the thing I give my students as their first activity, and I will share the link for this, I guess, in the comments below. But this, so you can use this. So this tutorial is helpful, but I'm gonna go ahead, copy and paste this right here. This is my first thing, setting up my notebook. So I'm gonna copy and paste. So let's hit the play button here. It doesn't look like anything happened, right? I'll do it again. Oof, looks like nothing happened, but actually you've imported a bunch of libraries. So plus code. So what do we have in the background? Well, we have a lot more than just wage, okay? Like we have pi. And so that's nice. We have the number pi, right? And there's all kinds of other things we have. But let's go ahead and like find the circumference of a circle. So how do we find the circumference of a circle? It's just 2 times pi times the radius, right? So if I hit execute, what do you think is going to happen? Let's check it out. Error message. Radius is not defined, right? So how would I get the radius? Oh, of course, I didn't define the radius. So let's do a unit radius, or radius equals 1 meter. And what's the circumference of something with 1 unit radius? It's 6.283, all that. So there you go. Let's add a little comment in here, because like, what is this code doing? So type in a hashtag, calculates the circumference of a circle, radius. That's good. Okay, let's see. So we'll hit the play button. It's gonna do it again. Let's do another code block. So that's great. We have pi in there, and that's really nice because there's actually quite a bit in here that we can call. See how you have to constantly be looking at your code, doesn't autocorrect. Let's talk about functions. I mean, I know this is going to sound nuts because it's like, why would I have still, like, even if I have pi, like, this is just like something I never see, I don't see the use of this. What's the use of this? So let's talk about functions. So we're now, this is the last thing I'm going to talk about, functions. Let's go to a Google calculator here. All right, Google calculator. So here you go. Here's your calculator. So far, I mean, we haven't really done that much, anything different than this, honestly, except now we can mark it up and that kind of thing. But what are these guys over here? I don't know if you guys have ever seen this before. Some of my students are really young, and they never seen the cosine button, right? So cosine and sine, these are the trigonometric functions, right? Tangent. So cosine of, you know, I think it's in radian mode. I'm not actually sure. Let's click radian mode. Cosine of, like, I don't know, 2. Well, you know, people are so used to it. Let's do degrees. Cosine of 45. That's like, maybe that's 0.5. There we go. There we go. That's degree mode. So this is radian mode. Yeah, and again, it helps if you know what you're doing. Yeah, this is root 2 over 2, right? Cosine of 45. In radians, that's this number, 0.525. Cosine of 45 is kind of weird because it's like a lot of circles, right, in radian mode. So anyway, so let's not get too much into the cosine. How would I do cosine in Jupyter? Well, so it's in there after I've imported the math libraries. Let me close Jupyter pendulum plot. If I can type in cosine, right? Cosine of 45. This is, I believe, is in radian mode, measured in radians, right? So this is like it matches what the Google calculator did. Now, how did I do this? Okay, so cosine was imported in the libraries, okay? But the interesting thing is, see, it's from math, import cosine, sine, pi, that kind of stuff. Okay, anyway, so we have like cosine 45. See how it has to have parentheses? That's what a function is. When you're doing a function, you have to like write the name of whatever the function is, and then parentheses and some number, and it spits out something else, right? So it's actually what you do in Google Calculator too. You type in cosine, and it does the parentheses for you, and then you close the parentheses, and then it gives you some answer, right? So what's another example of a function? There's like the log function, right? So like log of 10. Do you guys remember what that is? That's something you should know from math. It's 1, right? Because remember what log is doing is it's like taking the base 10, right? What's natural log of 10? 2.302, right? So if you take natural log of e, you get 1, right? Okay, anyway, so this is math, right? And these functions are incredibly useful. But again, the point that I'm trying to get here is if you don't know what log is, you do log, parentheses, and then the number, and then you close the parentheses. And you're basically saying that's my function. I want that function evaluated. So if I go into Jupyter land and type in a new code block, how do I get the log function? So this is actually a NumPy. It's in the NumPy library. So I imported NumPy as np. So you have to start with np.log. And let's do log of 10. What's log of 10? Isn't it 1? How did I get 2.302? How did I get? That's natural log of 10. So natural log of 10 was 2.3025. So how do I, so this is actually log, it's kind of confusing because like you have to know which function is which, but log is actually the natural log. And if you want the log base 10, you got to type in a 10 in there. And then it gives you 1. So like log base 10 of 12 is like 1.079. And if you go to Google Calculator, you can check that. So log of 12 is this 1.79. So it helps. How do I figure out where, what the name for these functions are? Like how do I get help, right? Like how do I find these things? And the answer is the internet. So you just Google, what is the exponential? Like let's do the exponential function. I mean, let's just do log. What is the log function in Jupyter Notebook? You could also type in Python, but that's fine. So if you scroll down, here's geeksforgeeks.org, numpy.log, right? And there's going to be a lot of examples in the search. And I know that sounds like kind of lame, but like you have to look for that, but usually Google finds you the answer right away, right? And so if I click on this, there'll be people like trying to figure it out. So it looks like exponential is just exp. Anyway, so I'll let you guys. I'll let you guys kind of look through Google to find out how to do things. And again, this goes back to growth mindset. It's like, oh man, how do I do the log function? You gotta have that. There's gonna be a log function for Jupyter Notebooks, and you just gotta find it. Okay, so we're basically done. I do want to just add one more little part, which is how to create my own function, which I thought was cool. Because how do you create your own function, right? Like I want my own function. So I'm gonna see if I can remember how to do this. So I actually Googled it and I was like, oh, this is pretty easy. So it's like define, and then your function name, parentheses. Is that right? I can't remember. Why can't I can't? You know, it's funny how bad my memory is. Maybe it's just I know I know that there is one of these colons at some point. So I'm gonna get it wrong. Watch, it's gonna be kind of funny. But anyway, so I'm just gonna do. So I think what I did was y equals mx. Oh yeah, I remember now. You do that, right? I think that's what you do. Okay, let's see. My brain's trying to remember this. So you have to put in, it's a function, right? You have to put in parentheses. And again, you can just Google an example of how to create a function to remember this if this one's too abstract for you. So y equals mx plus b, m times x plus b. So instead of doing mx plus b, I'm going to just do, let's see. Let's just give it 2 and 3. So y equals 2x plus 3. Return y. And I think I have to type in an x. I'm pretty sure I did it right. So what this is saying is I'm going to define a variable called y. It's going to vary as a function of x. That's how to read this, I think. This is how you do it. And my variable is going to be straight line, basically. It's 2x plus 3. So it's got a slope of 2 and an intercept of 3. And it's going to return that y. So let's hit play. And I think I did it right. So I know Jupyter is kind of crazy because like, oh, did I do it right or am I stuck? So here's what you do. You just try it now. So how did I do the cosine function? I typed in the word cosine and then some number. So I have to do the same thing for my new function y. So what's y with nothing, right? Like it's y is 0, right? Let's see if it did it right. 3. So what does that mean? If I put in a 0 right here for x, it destroys that, right? 0 times 2 is 0. Plus 3, so y equals 3. So that's nice. Let's do another code block here. Let's just do another one. What's y1? Let's hit play. Execute. I always hit play. 5. So I think it's doing it right, right? Because 2 times 1 plus 3 is 5, right? And so you can you now have a function that you can call that will do that. Now I know you're saying like this is pretty simple. I can do this in a graphing calculator. I can do this in Desmos or wherever. And like like what? I haven't really done it. You've made me a graphing calculator, right? So and again, let's do more variables here. So let's do like m comma x, m comma b comma x. So the commas are going to separate the numbers of variables. I have 3 input variables here. And then I'm going to change this down here to m times x plus b. So let's hit play again. And then let's go down here. Let's make a new code block just so you can see that it's working. So how can I test that this is working? So I'm going to define the slope as 2, like it was before, and then the intercept at 3, like it was before, and then I'm going to type in 0, x equals 0. So what that does is it spits me out exactly what I had before, right? If you don't believe me, let's just change that 0 to a 1. That would be this one right here, because the slope is 2, y-intercept's 3, and then the what happens when x equals 1? What's my y? It's 5, right? So as you can see, it's now a little bit more, you can have multiple inputs, right? So now I can change it to 1, 1, you know, like it's a y equals, well, I'm sorry, let's do no intercept. So y equals x, right, for any number 6. So I'll just do 6, it'll be 6, right? Y equals x, right? Y equals x. So anyway, now I've got a cool kind of like, you know, now I have this y variable in my background, right, that I can, excuse me, a y function in the background that I can change the variables of it, right? Like, I'm just thinking about like wage, salary. Let's just put wage, salary and stuff in there, like make it go crazy. But anyway, so that I'm going to stop there for the introduction, but this is kind of like a cool introduction. Some highlights, you can make cool text, a markup language between your code. You can type in very simple calculations, and you can define variables that are stored in the background. You can import libraries of variables and functions. So these are just not just variables, but functions, entire functions, right? Like cosine, sine, the logarithm function, right? You can create your own functions. And so now you are ready to start doing work. And, and it's kind of crazy. It's like, why don't, I actually think about this all the time. I'm like, why isn't this just like when I started up, that it just loads all the functions already and has everything going? Well, the reason that these are so specific is because different science, first of all, libraries can be huge, right? You can import an entire like library just on animation, right? Like, so if I'm just trying to use Python to animate something, like some sort of like computer animation software, right? Like that's going to take a lot of time to load. And that it's kind of like saying like, well, why open up Photoshop at the same time as you're opening up like, you know, some other program that does something completely different from video editing, like, or like picture editing, right? It's going to take forever to load. So everything is very specific to what you're trying to do. And that's, so in a way, Jupyter Notebook's kind of crazy because they have, they're like blank canvases. You have a blank canvas from which to create lots of things. And the other thing I want to say is, again, just run everything sequentially, right? Run them all, you know, run, you know, restart and run them all, right? And make sure you're doing it in order, because that's often the error message. And you got to hit execute every time, right? These are all like things I want to just get through as like big takeaways. Okay, I'm going to let you guys, I'm going to stop the tutorial there, but like, this is the first, how do I get help? Google everything. Everything's on Google. And it was a pleasure to talk to you.